All right, students. Let me first explain to you what's going on here. This lecture is the lecture on William Lane Craig, the Kalam Cosmological Argument. You're looking at my syllabus here. Now, this lecture was supposed to be broken down into three lectures. The first one was on Tuesday, April 7th. So we were supposed to have lecture on Tuesday rather than a Wednesday or a Monday because there was something else. I don't know. You know how it is. We skipped one of the classes. And so one of the lectures fell on Tuesday. So disregard that. And what's going to happen is that I'm going to break down the lecture into two parts. So this is the lecture for Monday, April 20th. And in the next video, I'm going to do the Wednesday, April 22nd. Okay, I hope that's not too confusing for you. At any rate, also I want to remind you, once again, that by clicking on the hyperlink here on the syllabus, it will take you to the PowerPoint that I'm about to show you. And in addition to that, you may go on YouTube and you'll see that you'll find thousands of videos on the Kalam Cosmological Argument. So let me start with the Kalam argument. Okay. So first of all, the Kalam Cosmological Argument is a very interesting argument. Well, interesting, even more than interesting. It's very challenging. It's challenging because if the argument is right, then the conclusion, as we will see, leads to the fact that, well, let's not call it fact, but leads to the conclusion that there exists an entity, a transcendental entity that is extremely powerful, at least powerful enough to bring into being the universe. And also this entity, whatever you might want to call it, since the universe is space and time, it follows that this entity must exist somehow outside space and time. The best that I can do to explain what that means, I don't even know what that means, but outside space and time. Well, if you are a religious person, if you're a believer, I guess it's easier for you to understand what it means to exist outside space and time. It means that for God, for this entity, if you want to call it God or whatever, for this entity, time doesn't exist. Time does not go on like it does for us. There's no time, no clocks, no watches, nothing for God or for this entity that we may call it God. So the argument is not a new argument. It's an old argument. There are many defenders of the argument. The two foremost defenders of this argument are Al-Ghazali, who was a Middle Eastern philosopher, a medieval philosopher, and William Lane Craig, a contemporary philosopher. He's still alive. In fact, you go on YouTube and you'll see many videos by William Lane Craig or about William Lane Craig. as you can see there, I just pasted 4 of these videos. These are the videos of William Lane Craig himself explaining the Kalam cosmological argument. There are also videos, short videos, on the Kalam cosmological argument. As you can see, this video here is entitled Aquinas. That's the name of this monk here, medieval monk, Thomas Aquinas, an Italian religious Christian philosopher, who also proposed a version of the Kalam cosmological argument. And this video here, and if you go on YouTube, you will see many, many videos of the Kalam cosmological argument, about the Kalam cosmological argument debunked. Okay, you'll see many of these videos. Why so many? Well, because, as I said, not only just normal people, lay people, but also philosophers, scientists realize that the power, the force of the Kalam cosmological argument. And again, if the argument is right, we're going to talk about what it means for an argument to be right just in a minute. I just wanted to say, if the argument works, if the argument is right, it leads to the necessary conclusion that there exists, as I said, an entity that is outside space and time. It doesn't exist like in space and time, but it's an intelligence. It's an entity that has intentions, that has an intelligence, that has a freedom, and furthermore, this entity is incredibly powerful. Well, you do the math. It's got to be an entity so powerful that can bring into existence the universe. That's not small potato. To create DNA, to create everything, essentially, to create the entire world. So, obviously, many people are scared about this argument, especially non-believers, especially atheists, are scared about the argument because if the argument is right, they have to accept the logic. You might not accept, for example, a priest preaching in a church or a pastor, but this is no priest here. This is logic, my friends. And logic is business. Logic is not democratic. You understand? Logic is not just a personal opinion. Logic tells you how it is. If the premises are true and the conclusion follows necessarily, whether you like it or whether you not like it, you have to accept the conclusion. So that's why, as I said, many atheists fear that the argument is right. So that's why you see millions of videos on YouTube trying to, as I said, debunk the Kalam argument. If you ask me, I don't think this is my personal opinion. But if you ask me, I have studied the Kalam cosmological argument for many years, and I have read all the papers, all the literature that came out, that was published on the Kalam cosmological argument. So I read all the defenses of the Kalam argument. I read all the so-called refutations of the arguments. And I have to say to you that, and this is not a good or bad thing, positive or negative, it's just a fact, I think, that no one, no scientist, no cosmologist, no philosopher has ever defeated the Kalam cosmological argument. Now, the attitude of most atheist philosophers is to say, I don't have to worry about it. So there are those who say it is a powerful argument, all right, but there's something wrong about it. And there are those who say it's not even a good argument. It is a mistake. They just dismiss it. And I want to suggest that it's not an argument that you can easily dismiss. So, I mean, this is really, as they say, food for thought, because think about it. If you are a non-believer and you accept and you recognize the force of this argument, then what? What are you going to do? Now, of course, let me also mention this very important point, that the argument itself does not prove the existence of any specific God. Now, of course, if you are religious and you're watching this video, you're saying, what is he talking about? Any specific God? Isn't God one? There's only one God. Well, what I meant was this, that the conclusion of the argument does not prove that Christianity is true, or Islam is true, or Buddhism is true, or Hinduism is true, any particular religion. The only thing that the argument shows, if successful, and we are going to determine that together, if the argument is successful, the only thing that it establishes is, as I said, that there exists something, let's call it something that created the universe. So the argument essentially proves that the universe is not eternal. In other words, if you had a time machine and you set the time machine to say millions of years ago, okay, at one point, I guess with the time machine, at one point, the time machine, let's say that the universe is supposed to be 14.8 billion years old, okay? 14.8 billion years. So let's say that you set the time machine to 15 or 16 billion years ago. Time machine is not going to go there, because prior to the Big Bang, 14.8 or 7 billion years ago, there was absolutely nothing at all. Now you might point out, how do you know? Well, we don't really know. Like we know that there's water in this glass. But we know this on the basis of logic, so philosophical argumentation, but also, since some people are not very fond of philosophy, but we also know this because science, because the best science today, okay, specifically if you want to look it up, there's a theorem published by three of the most eminent physicists in the world, Alan Guth, Alexander Vilenkin, and who's the other guy? Board. I don't remember his first name. Anyway, the Board Guth Vilenkin theory. Okay, this theory says any universe at all that, like our universe, is stretching, is expanding, must have a beginning. A beginning out of nothing. So literally, we're talking about the universe as space and time continuous. And before this, before 14.7 billion years ago, there's absolutely nothing. So the argument, if you want to deal with the argument, you have to deal with this notion, scientific theory that says that proves in the sense that mathematically speaking, philosophically speaking, and all the observation that we have, just like any other scientific theory, is the best explanation of the world. You see, for example, when Newton was alive, well, the theory, Newton believed that the universe is a giant empty space where God placed stars and planets. But now we know better than that. Now we have a better theory. Well, better because it's a better explanation. It fits the data better. And so now we understand that the universe is expanding, is not fixed, it's not an empty box. In fact, it's not empty at all because it looks empty, but it's like a fabric of space and time. Again, this is the best explanation that we have. Perhaps in 1,000 years, science will be very different. Perhaps they will discover that, after all, we were wrong about this. But that's a different story. So, let me present the argument to you and say a few things about this. Now, the argument is very simple, but it is simple because it is possible to express the argument very simply by formulating it into three simple statements, as you can see. But the statements have to be unpacked. The statements are themselves, each one, a conclusion of several arguments, as we will see. So now let me make some preliminary observations about these premises. The argument, first of all, can be formulated in several different ways. The result doesn't change. The end result doesn't change. It's the same story. The first premise, as you can see, says, whatever begins to exist has a cause. Now, I said that we can express the argument in many different ways because we don't need to formulate it in such a way that we include the concept of causality. For many people, the idea of cause is something obsolete, old-fashioned. What does it mean, cause? Some scientists say we don't really have a theory of cause. What does that mean that something causes? What I mean is that on a day-to-day kind of life, we have a vague idea of what cause is. For example, if I take this banana and I push the banana, I can say I caused the banana to move, say, off the table. Okay, but when you on closer inspection, it's kind of hard to really to determine what exactly is the cause. Is it me, the cause? Is it my finger, my skin? Is it the momentum? Is it whatever it is? What is it? So we don't need to formulate the argument this way. We can free the argument from the notion of causality. A causes B, and we can simply state it as anything at all that has a beginning, okay, anything at all that has a beginning, was brought into existence by something else. Simple as that. So in other words, this glass of water is not eternal, did not exist 1,000,000 years ago, 2,000,000 years ago. It was brought into existence, but it didn't just appear on my table in my house. The glass was made, it was manufactured by someone. Can you think of anything at all, that has a beginning? It's not eternal, okay? I can't even think of anything eternal, but think about anything at all that begins to exist, that it doesn't exist, and then at one point it does exist. Like a baby, for example. Okay? So let's say that you are 25 years old. Okay? So 26 years ago, you did not exist. And then you came into existence. So you began to exist. That's what it means, to begin to exist. Now, naturally, I cannot think of anything like that begins to exist, like a napkin, a banana, a glass, anything. You tell me if you can think of anything that begins to exist, that is not eternal, that could possibly have popped into existence out of nothing at all. I don't think it's possible. So whatever begins to exist was brought into existence by something else. That's the way we can also formulate it. But by the way, I have no problems with the notion of causality. We can leave it there. That's fine. I just showed you that there's a different way to phrase the first premise. Okay. Well, you can say whatever begins to exist as a cause, if you like, if you don't have any problems with the notion of cause. Okay. So by cause, what do I mean? I mean something or someone that initiates a causal connection, or initiates something, a thought or an idea or an object. Okay? So for example, this banana, I don't know if you can see it, this banana is not eternal. It began to exist. Not popped into existence out of nothing. So something must have brought it into being. If you want to say the tree, whatever you want, but there was something there that brought it into existence. Okay. Another observation is the second word, this one here, begins. What exactly does it mean to say that something begin to exist? So some people who dispute the argument have a problem with this word, because let me explain to you why. There are different ways in which things begin, and sometimes we don't know when they begin to exist. For example, this glass. When did the glass begin to exist? When, well, they were melting sand, when they first molded the glass, the shape, when they actually polished it, cleaned it, when they sold it at the store. Similarly, what about a baby? When does a baby begin to exist? Is it when the sperm emits the egg? Is it when the embryo is created, or the fetus, or is it when the actual baby, the fetus, comes out of the mom and becomes a human being? When exactly is it? So some people like to dispute the argument by saying, there's a problem in the first premise. The problem is that you, defender of the Kalam argument, are trying to sell me the idea that the universe begins to exist out of nothing. There's no pre-existing material, so to speak. There's no universe material. So the universe is supposed to come into existence out of nothing at all. Whereas the glass, there was sand, the banana, there was a tree, flowers. It would not. So you're cheating, essentially. That's what some people complain about, that you're cheating, because when you talk about beginning, about glasses, about things, about bananas, you're talking about things that begin to exist, but it's not really a beginning out of nothing. It's a process of evolution. You go from sand to glass. You go from whatever, a tree and a banana. So there's always something there. A baby, you have the sperm and the egg, and you have the parents. Okay. But this observation does not do anything to affect the argument, because the argument is not worried about when something begins to exist. See? In fact, the premise doesn't say whenever something begins to exist. It merely says it's merely interested in things that begin to exist. Now, whether it begins to exist at birth, a baby, or the sperm and the egg, that's not the problem. The point is, whichever time, wherever you want to put your finger and say, this is the beginning, it doesn't matter. It could be arbitrary beginning. The point is, the baby is not eternal. The glass is not eternal. The banana is not eternal. So, consequently, it means that they began to exist at one point. Okay? And if they began to exist, guess what? They must have a cause. There's no way out. Okay. What else did I want to say before I proceed with the demonstration of why the premises are true? Because this is what we have to do here. Yeah, one more thing I wanted to say. If you recall, okay, our lecture in logic, way back, we talked about logic. If you recall, what kind of argument is this? Is it a deductive or an inductive argument? If you answered it's a deductive argument, you are right. This is the kind of argument that we call deductive, because notice that the conclusion is not something that follows probably. It's not a probability given the premises. Okay, I'm talking about given the premises. So if you stipulate that whatever begins to exist has a cause, we don't know if this is true yet, but this is besides the point. If we stipulate that we accept premise one, whatever begins to exist has a cause, and the universe is one of those things that began to exist, then the conclusion is not probable. The conclusion is necessary. You must accept the conclusion that the universe has a cause. It just follows from, think about it, just look at the premises. Okay? So we know that this is a deductive argument, and because the conclusion follows necessarily. We also know that the argument is a valid argument. Remember, a valid argument is an argument whose conclusion follows necessarily from the premises. Now, the question is a deductively valid argument a good argument? Not yet is the answer, because a good deductive argument is a sound argument. What does that mean? It means that in addition to being a deductively valid argument, we also need to have true premises. So the question is, are the premises true? And this is what we are going to discuss now. We're going to talk about this. Let me see the time. Okay. So let's start with premise 1. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. Okay? Or, as I formulated earlier, anything that begins to exist, anything that is not eternal, must have something that brings it into existence. Okay? How do we know that this premise is true? Well, it seems pretty obvious that something, anything, a banana, a pencil, a sandwich, a glass, they can't come from nothing. I'm sure you wonder now, why not? Why can't a glass come from nothing? But the problem is, what brings the glass into existence? Well, you might say, well, maybe not the glass, but what about a tiny, tiny particle, a subatomic particle, a quantum particle? But it doesn't matter, does it, how big it is? Whether it's small or whether it's big, like a glass or an elephant. The question is always, what brought it into existence? Now, if there is nothing, nothing has no properties. Not that nothing contains something, because it's nothing. Nothing is not an empty space, by the way, because empty space is something. What is it? It's empty space. So nothing is really the absence of anything. It is the absence of energy. It is the absence of space. It is the absence of time. It is the absence of everything. So the question is, what brings into existence a glass or a subatomic particle or a quark or a quantum particle? Obviously, if the particle does not exist, it cannot bring itself into existence, can't bring itself into existence. But there's nothing there to bring it into existence. So it seems obvious that if you have nothing, nothing comes from nothing. Now, if you say, well, but maybe since the universe is so weird, maybe things can't come into existence out of nothing. It seems it doesn't really seem to be a solid argument. It's just saying, maybe we don't know. Maybe it's the point. And it's pretty controversial premise, I would say. Very controversial. I mean, when you think about it, the options. which is more plausible? That something that begins to exist is generated, is brought into existence by something else, or that things can pop into existence out of thin air, out of nothing actually, because thin air is something. And it seems, I don't have to tell you, it seems the more plausible, the most plausible notion is that things begin to exist out of something else. They have a cause. They have an efficient cause that brings them into being. Now, if something could come into existence out of nothing, there would be no principle. Why not a glass, in fact, instead of a subatomic particle? Why not a glass itself? What would prevent nothing at that point from generating glasses or babies or pizzas? It seems absurd. Furthermore, premise one is confirmed by what we know about science. What we know is that whatever begins to exist was brought into existence by something else. That's what we know. So it seems, I think, there's nothing else to be said about it, because it seems to me that the first premise is self-evident. Self-evident does not require any more argumentation or defense than out of nothing, nothing comes. If you can show it to me or prove it to me that it is possible that something, a particle or an object can come out of nothing, show it to me. But it's impossible. It's impossible to prove. Maybe, perhaps, there's something that came into existence out of nothing. But that's not an argument. It's not plausible. We have a good argument, on the other hand, that out of nothing, nothing comes. So I would say that, if I had to bet my money on it, would I put my money on it that it is true? I don't know. What would be the level of confidence? Maybe if you want to argue it's not 100%, because after all, the universe might be so weird that, in fact, it turns out that things come into existence out of nothing. And maybe there are certain laws that prevent glasses from coming into existence, or cell phones. You have to start with small things. Maybe. I don't know. But what's my level of confidence that this premise is true? Well, maybe 99%. Or maybe more than that. Because it's pretty obvious to me. At least in my mind, it's obvious that nothing, we can't even speak about nothing. Nothing is nothing. And nothing doesn't have the power to generate something. You say, well, maybe the universe is weird. But we're not talking about the universe here. We are talking about absolutely nothing. Okay? We're not talking about there is a universe and a particle can come into existence out of nothing. Because it wouldn't be coming into existence out of nothing if the universe exists. There is a universe. So maybe the universe is the cause. I'm talking about absolutely nothing. No energy, no universe, no space, no time. What brings into existence an object or a particle? It doesn't seem to me to be plausible. So, let's now talk about premise 2. Oh boy, premise 2 is the crucial premise in the argument, okay? Think about this. The universe began to exist. So perhaps if you are convinced by the first premise that whatever begins to exist as a cause, and it's kind of hard to dispute that truth. Perhaps you can attack the second premise, okay? And in fact, most people who deny that the argument is valid attack the second premise. It's I guess it's the most vulnerable of the two, that the universe began to exist. However, what I want to show is that it seems to me true that the universe began to exist. Again, more plausibly true than not. It is more plausible to believe that the universe began to exist than that the universe is eternal. I mean, there are very good reasons to doubt that the universe is eternal. And let me explain 3 reasons. Okay. Well, at least in this video, I'll try to explain 1, maybe 2. We'll see, because it's getting late. So let me give you 1 reason, the first reason. I have 3 reasons, as I said. But let me start with the first one. Now, let's think about this. Let's assume, so what I'm trying to do here with this argument is that I'm trying to show that the universe cannot be eternal. And in order to show you that the universe cannot be eternal, what I want to do is to start my argument from the assumption that the universe is eternal. Okay? Maybe it sounds bizarre to you, but that's how you do it. It's like, for example, saying, you stole the candies. No, I didn't, and I'm going to prove it to you. How are you going to prove it to me? Well, here's how I'm going to prove it to you. Let's assume that I stole the candies. Would I not have signs of, say, sugar or candies in my mouth? Would I not have, and so on. So that's a strategy that I'm going to use. Let's start with the supposition that the universe is eternal, okay? And show you that, and I'm going to show you that it's not possible. But let's assume, for the sake of argument, the universe is eternal. What does that mean, the universe is eternal? Well, essentially, what it means is this, that the universe, never began to exist. But what does that mean, it never began to exist? It means that the number of past events in the universe, the number of past days, years, centuries, and so on, will never end. It's infinite. But that's impossible. Now, look at this line, this illustration, what I mean. This is today. We're here. That's the future. Okay? And this is the past. So, if the universe is eternal, it means this, that before today, it was yesterday, and the day before, and the day before that, and the day before that day, and so on. And there's years, months, years, centuries, and so on. Okay? And it never ends, and never ends, and never ends, and never ends. Now, the problem is this. How many days do we have in the past of the universe if the universe is eternal? Well, again, I just told you, an infinite number of days. Now notice a difference here. This is a very important difference. When we talk about the future of the universe, tomorrow, the next day, the day after, and so on, how many days are in the future? We don't know. We like to think that, right, we're going to live long enough, 100 years and so on. But we don't really know. A comet may strike the Earth, destroy it. No more days, at least for us. Or the universe can just fizzles out into nothing. So we don't really know the number of days. But when we say an infinite, we can say an infinite number of days. As long as nothing happens, an infinite number of days. So my point, okay, focus, my point is this. The number of days in the future is a number that keeps increasing over time. So if we start counting today, doesn't matter when I start counting, but let's say that I start counting today. Tomorrow I count, okay, 1. Then the next day 2 and 3 and so on. So you keep going. As you can see, the number increases as you go. Vice versa, if we are talking about the past, it seems obvious to me. You tell me, okay? Interrupt me if you don't get it. Well, you really can't, because this is a video lecture. But you can pose these questions in the discussions page. Okay. It seems clear to me, at least, that the past days in the universe do not increase over time, because if they are in the past, they have already happened. They are already there. So the number is not increasing, the number of days, the number of whatever you want to divide the universe, days, years, months, whatever, centuries, millennia, okay? The point is still the same. That number, it's not increasing because it's in the past. In the future, it increases. In the past, it doesn't increase. Wait a minute. What do I mean by it doesn't increase? Now, if you count, of course, the number increases. But what I mean is, those days are already there. They already happened. Okay? They already happened. They're not increasing in that sense. They're already there. So that's a big difference. In the future is open. So the number of days keeps increasing. In the past has already passed. It's already there. Not increasing. You can count with your fingers and you'll keep counting, but the days are not moving and not producing any new days. They're already there. That should be clear, right? Okay. So what I just described is a very important difference. The difference between potential and actual. So a potential infinite number of things is possible. I just illustrated that to you. The number of the days of the universe in the future is potentially infinite. If you have enough time, if nothing happens, no meteorites or anything like that, the days will go on forever. How many? We don't know. goes on forever. Another example, you want to start a collection of coins or stamps. How many stamps can you collect? Oh, well, if you give me all the time in the world, I'm going to collect an infinite amount of stamps. Let's say that you are immortal, you never die. Well, then you can continue adding stamps forever and ever and ever, so long as the universe will continue to exist, of course. And that's a potential infinity. However, this works going forward, going to the future. The number increases. But if the past is already gone, has already happened, nothing is increasing. The days or the years or the eons or whatever they call it, the millennia, they're already there. They're not going anywhere. They're not increasing and not decreasing. The number, in other words, what I'm trying to say, the number of days or years or centuries is not potential, but is actual. What does actual mean? Actual mean that actual would be something very strange to think about, because actual would mean that the number of days in the past of the universe is actually infinite, but at the same time is finite, in a sense that if you were to group them together and count them, it's going to take you a long time, but in the end, there will be a number, a finite number. But this is just mind-blowing. It's just nonsense, because nothing can be finite and infinite at the same time. Well, not nothing, actually. There is something that can be like that, and but it's something that only exists in mathematics. So, for example, when mathematicians speak of sets of things, or say, for example, the number of all positive numbers, or the numbers of all the numbers, okay, the numbers of all positive, I just said positive, the natural numbers, okay? What mathematicians mean, essentially, is a number that is, well, very distinct. It's not increasing. It's complete. Okay? When you think about the concept, all the numbers, for example, all the positive numbers, all the negative numbers, or all the odd numbers, the number of numbers, or the number of these objects, is actually infinite. Okay? In a sense that you cannot add one more to complete the family, the collection of these numbers. And that only works in mathematics. It's only a mathematical concept. But in real life, in reality, it is impossible to have a collection of things, or any objects, or days for that matter, as we were talking about. It is impossible in reality to have an actually infinite number of things. Now, once again, why am I so worried about actual versus potential? Well, again, because if the universe is eternal, it means that the number of days in the past of the universe is actually infinite. In other words, the number of days is not increasing, and it's complete. You don't need to add one more day because the collection of days is complete. But that's impossible. Well, let me end part 1 here. And in part 2, I'm going to pick up from this point and explain why it is impossible that the universe, it is impossible that the universe has an actually infinite number of days. Okay? Or if you want to put it a different way, it is impossible that the collection of days in the past history of the universe is a finite, complete collection of days, and at the same time is infinite. That's impossible. Well, if you're curious, you're going to have to wait till part 2. I'll see you then.